Hello, welcome to COABE's Meet the Author, where we sit down with the authors from our latest edition of our journals. So my name is Shaketta Thomas, and I'm the Region 2 representative for COABE. I'm so excited to be sitting here today with two of our authors, Patsy Egan and Erin Cary, who brought to us their article, Movement and Intersections, Minneapolis Race, Pandemic, and Adult Education. Patsy Egan, so thankful to having you here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So there was a lot of activity in Minneapolis last year that sparked a series of events beginning with George Floyd's death. What inspired you or motivated you to get activated and write this article for COABE?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we wanted to write a narrative that captures both the impact and the response to recent events in Minneapolis. And given our city's presence in the news nationally and internationally after George Floyd's murder, we wanted to, in fact, this week in downtown Minneapolis, the trial of the police officer charged with his murder is underway, and they're currently in jury selection. So Minneapolis has just been in the kind of the epicenter of a lot of this in recent months. And we wanted to bring in kind of the adult education lens to it. How is it in adult education to be in the city right now, and look at it that way and situate our students and our work in this larger landscape of racial equity and immigrant integration. The students in the areas of the city most impacted by the violence in May and June are entirely people of color for the most part. They're at Erin's adult education site, for example, they're nearly all Somali and Latinx. We wanted to highlight the ways that neighbors have showed up for each other with groceries and cleaning supplies and basic needs, and beyond that, and more importantly, really highlight some of the work that people of color are doing to lead a movement for equity and community safety. And it's just extraordinary what's been happening in our city since the murder. So we wanted adult educators to see the myriad of ways that adult educators in Minneapolis and St. Paul have responded, and lift up that the families that they serve, and hopefully reach for some greater justice in the work that we do. The anti-racism work in Minnesota adult education is underway. We have a lot to do, but we thought we would highlight at least some of the work that has been taking place.
Oh, great, thank you. And yes, I was reading the article and it touched my heart. And I know we as adult educators have a lot of passion for what we do, but it really touched my heart how all of you collectively just got involved immediately to fill in that gap. As the learners were also heavily impacted by the events, and I'm sure there was a lot of emotional turmoil. What is it that you would like for readers, from the practitioner standpoint, of course, and also from the learner standpoint, to take away from this article?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Shaketta. We are hoping that in reading our article, some of our colleagues in adult education across the country, around the world, will gain some perspective from the firsthand glimpse that we give in the article into the many ways that ABE practitioners and our learners were directly impacted by the pandemic and the uprising in Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd. The Twin Cities, as Patsy said, were clearly a flashpoint in these international discussions that are surrounding these events. And so we had the hope of sharing some local stories from adult education programs, including the neighborhood where I direct programming in South Minneapolis, where we lost one of our classroom sites in a fire after the uprising, or as part of the uprising. We also wanted to involve perspectives from my learners directly, who are quoted in the article, who live nearby and are right at the intersection of these world events in this broad discussion. They're involved physically, politically, and emotionally. So in light of what we all experienced in 2020 to 2021 and learned together, we thought it might be beneficial for ABE practitioners to engage in some renewed reflection on the purpose of our field. Adult learners are likely to belong to populations or groups that are unfairly disadvantaged, and this leads to their need potentially for adult basic education pathways. So that may be because of race, language, legal status, criminal history. We all know this. Because of these identity-related factors, which has become increasingly apparent in the past year or so, our learners tend to experience intensified impacts from social gaps around safety, resources, digital literacy, mobility, other types of access to healthy, sustainable lives. So we have a conversation going on, and we talk in our article about how it's incumbent upon us as educators of adults to be aware of these justice issues and to consider how our program delivery, our curricula writing, our hiring practices, staff culture, other work as a professional community can be putting energy into structural changes and to advocate with our learners, alongside our learners, to remove some of these barriers. And in the article, we share some of Minnesota adult education's recent steps toward that goal.
Thank you. And you know, it's important to note that 74% of adult education learners are people of color, right? And perhaps many of our practitioners, that their ratio is not the same. And so that active listening that I kept hearing and reflecting upon our practices in your article, I found to be very beneficial. Even from my walk of life, maybe different from others' walk of life. So that active listening and being reflective in our practices and the needs of our learners, I found very powerful. When reading the article, and I was listening more so and hearing you today, yes, 2020 was a year on all fronts and going through the pandemic, but the more emphasis was the viral pandemic was on the back burner. There was a bigger pandemic that we all were experiencing here in the United States of America. So what do you hope readers will actually take away, pretty much as you have taken away from the events that occurred, but take away and actually be able to put into action, rather in their communities as you have?
Thank you. I think action is a key word here. We want people to feel maybe an increased sense of activism. That's sort of a hope in the discussions in Minnesota. So some examples I have, Minnesota has a statewide advocacy group that's working for and led by ABE teachers and learners instead of maybe legislators or administrators. And the group is called I Am ABE. You can Google I Am ABE. It's one word to find our website. We're just teachers, so it's a small free website. And we have a statement that individuals and organizations can sign on to, committing to supporting equity and justice actions in our work. So we encourage people to sign on to that statement and to bring those ideas to your program. We also have some recorded webinar trainings on how teachers and volunteers can become advocates for the field of ABE. We have a toolkit for writing participatory curriculum in collaboration with your learners. And we have some free multi-level curricula around topics like mental health, teaching singular they pronouns, and how learners can participate in activism and contact their representatives. So really involving our learners and refocusing some ideas around how teachers can be maybe bringing forward their voices, having direct contact with the learners, and then amplifying student voices.
Thank you. And Patsy, any thoughts to that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm so impressed with the work of I Am ABE, and Erin and her colleagues have done so much work in getting that off the ground and getting resources into the hands of educators. And it's so great to see that getting more notice. The work is not new. They've been doing it for years, but with this year, it seems there is renewed or ignited energy around it that is long overdue. So it's great to see that happening. Some things that we've been able to do, I work in professional development for adult education. So I'm housed at a university, Hamline University in St. Paul, which is a social justice minded university. We're able to do a lot within our campus and connect some of the resources on campus with the work that we do in professional development for adult education. So that's been just a tremendous partnership that we have. And then on our website, for example, and we're at atlasabe.org, we have a new cultural competency online library that we call it cultural competency because that's what the state calls it, but really there's a lot of work there around trauma-informed instruction, anti-racism, it's social justice work. really picking up on the fact that no educator is neutral, and what we do in our classrooms, and from everything from the readings that we choose to the questions that we ask and whom we call on, and all the ways that we conduct ourselves in our workplaces with learners and with our colleagues have racial connections, and we need to be aware of those in order to make change. You can't dismantle systems without knowing that they exist. And so we're trying to get more energy into that, and we are having just fantastic response to the webinars and workshops and various resources that we've been able to put out into the field. So it's growing. We will no doubt add more. But that cultural competency library is a place to start. There's new energy also around really looking at instruction with an equity lens and doing something of an equity audit of our materials. What are we saying? What are the meta messages that we're sending to our students with the choices that we're making in our classrooms? So that's something that we're starting, and we will continue to grow in that work and hopefully become better, more just educators as we do so.
Well, thank you, ladies. It seems like you really are being change agents within your communities, but also having tools and resources. So I Am ABE is one of them. And we should be able to plug in some more of those tools and resources with this video so our audience can be able to look into them. Any additional comments or thoughts after you've written the article? What new energies do you have, or what new thoughts or activities you would like to see or direction you would like to go in?
I think one thing we're hoping to have in Minnesota, at least, is more statewide leadership around it. There's, it's been, the people who are interested showing up and kind of the same faces over and over again. And what I would like to see, and what I'm already seeing, is more widespread use of language that we all need to be using: anti-racism, white privilege, white supremacy, all of the words that, perhaps people recoiled at a few years ago. I need to be mainstream. We can't dismantle something we can't talk about, right? So I'm seeing that happening. I'm seeing excellent leadership from our state team in the Department of Education, just some really, really heartening things happening in a very disheartening time. Erin, what would you add?
I totally agree. I feel like the state has been very positive and supportive around growing some of these equity-related initiatives. I also love to see energy coming from the supposed bottom up. I think from the students and the teachers really connecting with each other, connecting across staff to build on people's independent work that they're doing to hopefully build up their own knowledge around these topics, and to make some changes even at a smaller staff level, even within our individual practices as educators, creating a classroom culture, writing curriculum. I think that it's critical to have those practitioner voices, because and to allow the bigger systems to be informed by them, because those are the folks on the ground and the folks who have the opportunity to collaborate with learners on their goals and needs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just seeing COABE put together a whole volume on this topic, like, things are happening, and it's exciting to be a part of. And though Minneapolis has been a place of great sadness, it also, we hope, is a turning point, and a place that at some point people will say, yeah, things really started to shift and get better after that happened. Exactly. That's our hope, at least.
Exactly. And I am also thankful to COABE and to our president, who really was the brainchild of this. It's like, hey, we have to be responsive, and serving our students and hearing their needs. And that's what you all have done as well. And I'm thankful to you for being activists in your communities and spreading the word and seeing that a change is needed to negate barriers and elevate everyone so that we can all have equity. So thanks, Patsy Egan, Erin, and Cary as well. If you have not already read their article, I encourage you to check out the latest edition of COABE's journal, entitled Racial Equity and Immigrant Integration, and their article, Movement at the Intersections, Minneapolis Race, Pandemic, and Adult Education. It truly is a powerful read. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us here today.